Hey, I didn't see you there. I was just addressing some postcards to my legislators. Like I was saying before, the best things to do are the hard things, and that's write physical letters to them. Of course, I'm doing the emails and the phone calls, but sending them things that they have to physically deal with, I'm hoping will have even more impact, because now someone's going to have to touch something, someone's going to have to actually read something, and keeps them from using an AI to keep me at arm's length. And I'm exercising my freedom of speech. Freedom of speech has come up in recent issues lately because of the, of course, murder of Charlie Kirk. Say what you want about Charlie Kirk. He was a racist and a misogynist and a zealot, but he was very much a defender of freedom of speech. He ended up giving his life defending the same freedom of speech that his best friend, Donald Trump, is working so hard to squash. To give credit where credit is due, he did have the strength of his convictions, and he did get out and talk the talk and walk the walk. There are 272 Republicans in the legislature, and how many of them are holding town hall meetings to face their constituents and defend their opinions? With Charlie Kirk's tour of Prove Me Wrong, he did a great service for the liberals in that he forced young people to think about their actual opinions. All too many of us very frequently base our opinions on sound bites and headlines. And if you wanted to go up and debate Charlie Kirk and all you had was sound bites and headlines, you weren't going to get very far. He would shut you down. So he forced the young people at these rallies to research their opinions and hone their skills so that they could debate him. So that was a good thing for all of us. As far as violence in politics, there is no place for it. His murder was uncalled for and un-American. It is a national tragedy, and ironically, I believe he will be remembered more fondly than Trump. So, moving on. In my last video, I made comments about a possible civil war. I want to be clear, I am not calling for a civil war. I am not predicting a civil war. I am warning against the possibility of a civil war. I am warning that the safeguards that prevent such things are being chipped away at. So we need to pay attention. We need to write the cards and letters. We need to make the emails. We make the calls, and especially vote. You really need to vote. So please, when the midterms come up, November 3rd, 2026, vote in the midterms or protest the fact that the midterms are being disrupted. If you're interested in a discussion of the impracticalities of a civil war, Jason Pargin put together a nice video that my son sent me, and I'll give you the link at the in the comments section. It's a good watch. It's entertaining and informative. But let's move on to the point of this video. This video's subject is alienation, isolation, and safety. As you know, we are a member of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The purpose of NATO is to prevent global wars. Why did we make NATO in the first place? Well, let's go back to 1938. In March of 1938, Germany annexed Austria. And that wasn't that big a deal. People kind of knew that those really went together and said, all right, fine. And then a couple days later, he took over Czechoslovakia. And nobody made that big a fuss about it. And then in September, he started looking at Poland. And over the last many months, Neville Chamberlain of England was using the diplomatic policy of appeasement. You see, World War I was not that long ago at that point, and nobody wanted to go back to it. And when Germany started rearing its head, Neville Chamberlain decided to try to make nice with Hitler as opposed to standing up to Hitler. So when Hitler started looking at Poland, he considered what the Allied situation was at the time. The United States at the time was completely out of the picture. We weren't talking to anybody. We were going after isolationism. We didn't want to play with anybody else anymore after World War I. So he was curious, There were only two major allies for Poland, Britain and France. And with the appeasement that he's been getting from Britain all this time, he questioned their steadfastness in their alliance. He questioned whether or not anyone would come to help if he went after Poland. And if they did, well, one of them was France, so he did. And Britain and France immediately declared war on Germany, and thus the beginning of World War II. The point being that because of the perceived weakness of the alliance, Hitler thought it was a good gamble to attack Poland and figured he had a really good shot of getting away with it. Had he been more convinced that the alliance was strong, he would have thought twice about making that move. But we presented a show of weakness, and that gave him the confidence to go after it. So World War II could have been avoided if we were just taking a strong stance. As the war progressed, Hitler took over more and more countries, and by 1942, he was right to the shore, and the only thing between Hitler and us was the island of Great Britain. And that was much closer than we ever want war to come to us again. So, after World War II, we created the NATO alliance. And as of today, there are 32 nations in the NATO alliance with the credo of all for one and one for all. One of the best things about NATO for us is that it allows us to conduct war the way we like to conduct war. And how do we like to conduct war? We like to conduct war over there. Over there. Send the word over there. We will go over there. When world wars start, we like to be home where our electricity is not being bombed, our bridges are not being bombed, our airports are not being bombed, and we can sit home with our abundance of food and Amazon Prime. So that's the advantage that we have coming out of NATO. Is it fair? No, it's not fair. But we would be foolish not to take advantage of that advantage. So, Article 5 of the NATO alliance states that an attack on one is an attack on all. And having that many allies is a great deterrent. Now, we should make a point about the difference between allies and friends. Up until recently, we had many allies and some friends. And the difference being is allies will come to your aid out of mutual self-interest. It behooves me to join you to fight this enemy because it'll be easier to fight this enemy together than separately, one at a time. And a good example of the difference between our allies and our friends would be 9/11. The one time in NATO's history that Article 5 was invoked was September 12th. The day after September 11th, we went to our NATO allies and said, look, we were attacked on our soil by Al-Qaeda, which was supported by the Afghan government of the Taliban. So we presented the evidence, and our allies all looked at it and said, yep, that's right. And Al-Qaeda is a common enemy, because Al-Qaeda is not just attacking the US, they're attacking everybody, and it's time to band together, and we have a target, let's go after them, and we all went. Now, it is true that the United States was the biggest force in the war in Afghanistan. We are the biggest force in NATO, which bears some correction. But be that as it may, over 1,000 other countrymen died in our war in Afghanistan. So they did stand up, they did show up. Our allies came to our aid. So after Afghanistan, Baby Bush said, hey guys, while you're up, why don't we go to Iraq as well? Why don't we go kick Iraq's ass? And the other nation said, okay, we don't like Iraq, we don't like Saddam Hussein, but why? Why should we go to war? Because Iraq has a no-fly zone, they're pretty much under everyone's thumb, they're really not a threat. Why should we go after Iraq? Well, so Baby Bush had to come up with a reason. And so he made up some stuff. First, he said they were part of the 9/11 attack. And of course, they were not. And that was quickly proven. Then he said they had yellow cake uranium, and that was proven false as well. And so finally he went to the old standard of weapons of mass destruction. They are making weapons of mass destruction. They are getting ready to attack the world. And our ally said, okay, what proof have you got of that? And we said, well, we don't really have any proof, but we know it's going on. And yeah, we're sure of it. And our ally said, no. They said, yeah, maybe not. Of course, the real reason Baby Bush was so anxious to go after Iraq, after the Iraq-Kuwait War, Iraq did try to assassinate Bush Sr., his dad. And I can understand that. If someone tried to assassinate my dad, I would have a problem with that. I would have a chip on my shoulder. And there are many things that we could have done. We could have done, the old CIA hit squad and, go kill Saddam in some nice covert way. But that's not what he wanted to do. That's not what the hawks in DC wanted to do. They wanted to go blow the snot out of Iraq and make a point. But that's really not a good reason to go to war, and that was definitely not a good reason for our allies to jump in. However, England was our friend at the time. And the way friends work are, you and your buddy are just standing together, and you look at your buddy, and you look at the enemy, and you say, you know what? I don't know much about you, but if he doesn't like you, I don't like you. And that's all I need. If my best friend says we need to go kick somebody's ass, we're going to go kick somebody's ass. If I tell my best friend, hey, we need to go beat up this guy, my best friend says, okay, let's go beat up that guy. We don't need a real reason because we're friends and we're going to stick together. We like each other more than we like you, and that's all there is to it. So Britain joined us in the attack on Iraq. They knew They knew Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. They knew Iraq had no yellow cake uranium, and they knew there was no evidence of weapons of mass destruction. But what they did know was their best buddy was spoiling for a fight, and they were going to stand with us. So, hurrah. Now, a few other nations did join in with us, but not like England did. They mostly joined in to not piss us off. So, we went to Iraq, and Iraq was the whole thing. So fast forward the clock to today, and do we have any allies, and do we have any friends? Or have we alienated and isolated? So recently there was a NATO summit, and prior to it, many reporters asked Donald Trump what he thought about Article 5, and would he steadfastly support the idea of an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us, and would he come to the defense of any nation that was attacked by an enemy? And he vacillated. He said, well, there's many ways to define Article 5. No, there's not. And he said, if it was in America's best interest, yes, we would come to their aid. And he also said that if they were paid up, if they were paying what we thought was the appropriate amount to be in NATO, then we would come to their aid. That does not create the image of a robust alliance. That does not tell the world that, hey, we are all together and we don't like you, you're in trouble. Now when the summit did come up, he finally did sign the agreement, but it was pretty obvious that it was reluctant, and both our friends and enemies saw that reluctance, and that weakens the alliance. Since then, Trump has gotten what he wanted in that the European nations are now contributing more to the NATO fund, and they are all individually working on building up their own armies, but they're not doing it for the right reason. The right reason would be to have a nice, strong, robust NATO to where it's not just America bringing on a bunch of stragglers. There's 32 nations that are all kick-ass and we're all coming for you. That's not why they're doing it. They're doing it because they, our allies, don't believe that we will come to their aid should Russia attack. They are unconvinced of our support. And if our allies are unconvinced of our support, what do you think our enemies are thinking? Add to that he's threatening the sovereignty of Canada and Greenland and making noises about going after Mexico, and he has conducted and he has enacted worldwide tariffs, disrupting the economies of several nations and ourselves. He is not putting us in the best light of a good ally and good friend and a beacon of strength for freedom and democracy. What else has been going on that would lead Europe and Russia to believe that our resolve in standing up with our allies is weakened. Well, there is that Russian-Ukraine war. As you recall, during the first Trump administration, Trump was very annoyed at us giving aid to Ukraine. Through the entirety of his administration, he kept praising Putin and sucking up to Putin and buddy-buddy with Putin, and was very adamant about how Ukraine was really not a priority, to the point where he actually withheld arms and money that was due Ukraine, that was approved by Congress, but he took it upon himself to withhold that money. Why? For personal gain. He was blackmailing Ukraine to help him find dirt on Hunter Biden, which is how he got impeached one of those times. After his presidency, an emboldened Putin decided to go ahead and attack Ukraine because obviously we were in disarray. As soon as he attacked Ukraine, ex-President Trump publicly praised Putin's brilliance for invading Ukraine. So when he says that Putin would have never invaded Ukraine under his watch, when on the flip side he is praising Russia for invading Ukraine, which do you actually believe? And once he became president again, what is the first thing he did when he said he was going to make that phone call and end the war in a day? He got with his buddy Putin, and they came up with a scheme to negotiate a peace treaty. The terms of the peace treaty, well, of course, Ukraine was not consulted at all in this peace treaty. The proposition was that Russia could keep everything they've stolen, and Trump could have all of the rare minerals that Ukraine possessed. Much to Trump's surprise, Ukraine did not go with that deal. And even more to his surprise, all of Europe opposed the deal. It is not a good look when the leading member of NATO is on the wrong side of a communist versus democracy war. So, not a good look for us. And of course, don't forget that Trump blamed Ukraine for Russia's invasion of it. Okay, since that initial debacle, Russia has escalated its war effort against Ukraine. So if Putin is so afraid of and so respectful of Trump, why is he going against Trump and escalating the war? Who knows? And during all of that, Trump has refused to increase any kind of meaningful sanctions against Russia. He keeps putting meaningless deadlines out there. In 30 days, if they don't do this, I'm going to do something big. And if they don't do something in 90 days, well, this time I mean it. I'm going to do something that you will see. And in all of that, is there anything else to make Europe nervous about which side we're on? Well, there was this surprise announcement from Trump. Out of the blue, he suddenly said that he was going to start supplying Ukraine with defensive capabilities again. All of the second term, he's still been withholding supply in Ukraine. Even during all this time when he says he's mad at Putin and things have to change, he still hasn't sent what he's supposed to be sending to Ukraine. All of a sudden, out of the blue, he says, we are going to immediately supply Ukraine with missile defense systems. They should be arriving in a matter of days, he said. And then about 24 hours later, he clarified that what he meant was he was ordering the Eastern European countries to give up their missile defense system and send it to Ukraine, and that he would make sure that they got replacement missile systems eventually. So with an emboldened Putin who recently claimed that there are no borders to Russia. His plan is to disarm the significant defensive capabilities of the European nations in the face of Russian aggression. The European nations were not big on that idea. Nobody did it. And good thing, because go figure, Putin started attacking Poland. And the European NATO nations are stepping up. They have more flights, they are shooting down drones, they are threatening the Russian jets that come across the border, and Trump is silent. So, yeah, there is no confidence that we're going to stand up and do our job as a NATO member in this situation. Okay, so what else has been going on that has put us in a bad position on the world stage, alienated our allies, and further destabilized our national security and actual physical safety? Well, there's that little thing going on in Israel. Israel and Gaza have been a problem for the last couple of years. And it bears noting, Hamas did bring a lot of this on themselves. On October 7th, 2023, Hamas made a stupid move and violently attacked Israel, killing nearly 1,200 people. They attacked 20 different communities. They attacked soft targets. There was the concert and all of that. So Israel had every right to counterattack. And no one in the world begrudged them opening up a can of whoop ass. So they whooped ass. And they knocked the snot out of Hamas. And we were okay with that. And the rest of the world was okay with that. But then it became time to, kind of pull it back a little bit. Okay, he's down, you kicked him up, you broke his legs and all that. But Israel kept going. Israel bombed hospitals, they bombed schools, they bombed apartments, they bombed shopping centers. And the rest of the world's like, dude, you want to reel it back a little bit? And then they started targeting aid workers. They directly bombed ambulances. And they blockaded food and medicine getting into civilians. And when aid stations were finally set up to distribute food and medicine to the Gazans, Israel directly attacked those stations to keep the general populace of Gaza starving and ailing and dying. And Israel made it very clear. They stated they wanted the Palestinians gone. Not necessarily dead, they don't have to die, but they need to get out and never come back. And the rest of the world had a problem with that. The rest of the world started condemning their actions. The rest of the world started having a real problem with Israel and started saying so to their face. And when I say the rest of the world, I mean everyone but, of course, the U.S. And I'm sorry, the U.S. is us, and us, we're not doing anything about it. So as Israel started committing war crimes, Trump was fine with it. In fact, Trump told Gaza, hey, if you don't get out of town, you're just going to die. And why don't you leave and give me all your land and I'll make a resort out of it. Because that's what Trump does. So apparently there was nothing Israel could do to get on Trump's bad side. War crimes, whatever, we don't care. Well, that's until September 9th. Israel bombed some buildings in Qatar because there were Hamas leaders staying there. Why were Hamas leaders staying in Qatar? They were there for peace negotiations. So again, not a good look for Israel to bomb people who are coming to the peace table. But of course, there is the question of why were they in Qatar for these peace negotiations? What's so special about Qatar? Well, Qatar does fund Hamas and, aid them in several different ways. So they do have an in when talking to Hamas. So yeah, Qatar, not that great, but they're a useful frenemy. But for some reason, Trump had a big problem with Israel bombing Qatar, so much so that he went to Israel physically and made Netanyahu call Qatar and apologize for the attack, for their regrettable actions. Wow. That kind of crap just doesn't happen. Why now? Why is Trump flexing his muscle now? If he could make Netanyahu call and apologize, he could have stopped these war crimes. But he didn't care about the war crimes, but he suddenly cared about the Qatar attack. Why was that such a big deal? Well, I guess that calls for a flashback. But of course, it doesn't stop there. He has accepted a free plane from Qatar, and while he was in Qatar picking up his free plane, his sons were signing golf course and hotel deals. Sure. So if you ever wanted to know what a 747 jet and some golf courses could buy you, now you know what that can buy you. But Trump didn't just stop there. He didn't just stop at the apology and make Israel back off. He signed an executive order pledging national security for Qatar, that any threat on Qatar was considered a threat to the United States. If anyone attacks Qatar, the United States will consider it a military threat on us, and we will respond in any way necessary, including militarily. We will guarantee Qatar's sovereignty and security. But we didn't want to do that for NATO. Oh, and he didn't stop there.
Okay, just pause this for 1 second. I just want to say one quick thing. You'll like this. While I was editing this, peace broke out in Gaza and Israel. And I think that really actually reinforces my point that I made earlier about friends versus allies. Because as you recall, just a little while ago, Israel bombed Qatar. And all of a sudden, they realized something about friends and allies. Qatar is Trump's friend. And on the 29th, he put out a proclamation saying anyone that threatens Qatar is a threat to us, and we might just respond militarily. And with that stroke of a pen, a cold wind blew across the Israeli desert. And 10 days later, Netanyahu is looking around saying, hey, you know, maybe Hamas has learned their lesson. Yeah, I think we made our point. Sure. Hey, guys, everybody, back on the bus. Pizza at my place. You know, we're going to come back to this parallel over here. And, you know, why don't we release, you know, a few thousand prisoners, too? So everything's kosher here and now, and we can do peace, and you all don't have to die. You don't have to be genocided. You don't have to leave. We'll work it out, okay? So we're all cool here, right, Trump? Yay! That's what I think happened. Anyway, back to the video.
No. But that's not all. What else did we do? Well, just the other day, we decided that Qatar can bring some of their Air Force jets over to Idaho, the Mountain Home Air Force Base, and they can bring some of their jets in and hang out with us, and we've built them a little facility there, and they can train with our guys and, you know, hang out with us. Because, you know, just because you support terrorism, you gave us a jet and some golf courses. You are our kind of people. So, again, not a good look on good guys versus bad guys. And there's a couple other things. One of the big ones lately is the fact that he's bombing Venezuelan ships that are suspected of being drug ships. Now, yes, we should be doing something about the drug ships coming out of Venezuela. So what you do is you intercept the ships, you commandeer the ships, you board the ships, you arrest the people on board, you blockade, you turn back, all kinds of things you can do that would be legal. Bombing a ship without warning is not one of the legal things you do. You cannot murder people because you suspect they're breaking the law. That is just not how it's done. Not in America, not how Americans do things. We have a due process. You can't just kill people because you think they're bad. You have to prove it, and then you arrest them if possible. You don't just kill them for fun. So that's where the rest of the world is very iffy on us right now. And that makes them more vulnerable to attack. That makes us more vulnerable to attack, because when an alliance is fractured, enemies see opportunities. And another fracture that is happening in our borders is Trump threatening to deploy and actually deploying military personnel to attack our own citizens. He is using the military against people he doesn't like. And when you have internal stress like that, other nations who might have ideas against us see this disarray and understand that it is very difficult to band together a group like this to fight a common enemy. We probably would band together for a common enemy, but we would be slower. We would be less enthusiastic. We would be less efficient. We would be less potent because we're under so much internal strife. There are a lot of people who just won't follow Trump at all, no matter what happens. This is not good. This is not how it's supposed to work. So those are my concerns. I'm not saying that World War III is coming. What I am saying is we have put it on the table and it should not be on the table. What I am saying is all the things that we have in place that would normally stop such a thing from even being considered are one by one being taken away, little bits at a time. And there are only so many safeguards and stopgaps and fail-safes that you can take away before something bad happens. So we need to be paying attention to this. I have a foil hat conspiracy theory. I don't know that Trump is this forward thinking, but he is this level of narcissistic, and he is this greedy, and he is this manipulative. So my foil hat theory, and I'm owning it. This is a foil hat theory. Is Trump trying to stir up a war between Russia and Europe during which he would quit NATO and just sit back and collect the spoils once the two sides are spent? Damn, that's a fucked up thing to think about. I don't want to think about that. I didn't say it, you can't prove it. So, that is episode 7. That's all I got for the moment. It's October, so Halloween is coming up, so I'm probably not going to make any video until after Halloween because I've got to make something for the kids. I've got an idea of a cave and a thing and eyes and stuff. So there's a King's Day protest coming up on the 18th of October. I expect all of you to be there. I have got my sign made up already. It's clever. I'll post pictures somewhere of my attendance. But send the cards, send the emails, make the phone calls, harass your congresspeople, harass your state congresspeople. Let's make a noise and let Congress know that we support the funding of the ACA, that we support democracy, that we denounce kings, that we are fully behind due process, that democracy is what this country is all about, and Trump is not about democracy. And most of all, November 3rd, 2026, vote. For the love of God, vote. Because that is our big chance to fix this or lose this. So, that's what I got. That's where we're at. See you all later.